Namaste and welcome to the Hindu American Dream podcast, where we interview professionals from various walks of life. My name is Riya Nayak, and I am a junior at the University of Houston and a board member of the Hindu Yuva group at UH. Today, I have a special guest. Samir Kalsa is the managing director at the Hindu American Foundation. He graduated from Santa Clara University School of Law and is licensed to practice in California. He has worked on many legal advocacy issues, religious accommodation, hate crimes, and Hinduphobia. He has led international human rights fact-finding missions, advocacy campaigns, and served as a panelist at multiple congressional briefings. Just before we get started, Samirji, do you want to add anything to that or anything you would like to say?
No, namaste everyone. Thank you. I think that is a good enough introduction. Very kind of you. Thank you.
We can get to the questions then. So
Perfect.
I was just interested about your childhood and maybe what brought you into law.
Sure. That's a great question. So I've always been interested so I grew up in America. I was born and raised. My parents came to the US in the 1960s. Grew up in California. Grew up around quite a few Indian Americans and Hindu Americans. For those that are familiar with Fremont, which is kind of one of the larger Indian American and Hindu American towns in the U.S. I've always been interested in issues around law, policy, human rights, and combining that with my interest in Indian history and things that have affected Hindus throughout the centuries. I think kind of helped to shape, my interest in my eventual path to where I am today. I would just add to that my dad was a refugee during the partition of the Indian subcontinent, who was born in Lahore and originally from a town called Dera Ismail Khan, which is on the Indus River. And so his experiences and kind of my roots, in now a country that has no space for Hindus and Sikhs and other minorities, has also helped to kind of shape my interest in some of these larger issues that I deal with today, and just kind of serving the larger public through the law and policy in other areas.
Okay. So you would say you were always pretty connected with your Hindu roots from childhood, and so.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It took different shapes when I was younger and evolved over the time, but definitely always felt connected to that identity and our history.
And did you work anywhere before joining the Hindu American Foundation? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was practicing. I worked in a public interest organization doing health and disability law prior to HAF, and I had done a lot of internships in different areas, always in public interest work, I think, which was a natural segue for me to get into HAF, where I feel I'm also serving the public and the interests of the Hindu American community in particular. But I was working professionally in public interest law prior to HAF.
Interesting. I was just interested what a typical day looks like working at the Hindu American Foundation.
Great. So I would say that one of the great things about the job is there's no day that's really typical. Each day is very unique and brings with it a unique set of challenges and a unique set of opportunities. But just to kind of give you just a basic idea, we end up being on calls and meetings, planning out strategy for different projects, both internally as well as externally. So any given day, I may be on a number of meetings or calls with our internal policy team or our internal staff as a whole or education team, planning out projects, or conversely with external stakeholders from our allies in different communities or on various civil rights or human rights issues or attending events or webinars. Other time is spent writing, working with my team to address community inquiries on issues and how best to address various things that come up. Or maybe working with policymakers, on particular pieces of legislation or larger policy issues that we're trying to get passed or introduced, whether domestic at the local or state level or international human rights as well. So it's a combination of multiple things. Very never a dull day.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds fun. Um, so being in your field, there's a lot of challenges you face every day with the people you have to interact with, or just hearing about these stories. It must be very difficult at times. So what would you say are the biggest challenges you face, you feel like?
Sure, that's a good question. I would say for a lot of the issues, and it doesn't matter whether it's education, policy, legal, a variety of areas, it's really getting, I think, an understanding of or getting greater prominence for the issues that the community faces. So, for instance, the concept of Hindu phobia, getting that recognized and getting that adequately addressed by other stakeholders. Or it may be issues dealing with specific bills around like the swastika, for instance. So getting an understanding that, hey, the swastika and the Hawk and Cruise are two different symbols, and we need to protect our community. So getting greater understanding. So I think it's getting awareness and giving prominence to the issues that we face, and making sure that they don't get marginalized by what other groups may be pushing, or the agendas of other organizations or lobbies. I would say that's probably the biggest issue. I think once we're able to get our foot in the door somewhere or on a particular issue, I think people start to understand and we're able to build relationships and alliances. So it gets much easier. But definitely navigating and getting those on people's radars in the first place, and making sure that they give the same importance to our issues as they may to other groups' issues or concerns.
Lots of patience. Yeah,
It's a long game, so you definitely have to have patience, and nothing's going to be solved overnight.
right. So on the opposite kind of thing, what do you think is like something you're really proud of, or a greatest success you have with a certain policy or outreach you've done that you want to highlight? Thanks.
Sure. So I've been with HF full time for over 11 years now, and as a volunteer for over 13 years. So there have definitely been a lot of very positive achievements and victories that I would call them. I would say probably one of the proudest was some of the California textbook reform efforts back between 2015 and 2017, and in making changes in kind of the frameworks that define what goes into the textbooks, as well as some of the textbooks themselves. And I think the reason for that was because I think it was an example of how the whole community came together. It was an example of multiple organizations, temples, linguistic groups, grassroots organizations, cultural organizations, religious advocacy groups, civil rights groups, as well as those from outside the community coming in to support us. That I think really made me feel that it was one of our biggest achievements, because it's very difficult to get everyone on the same page and working in the same direction. So that was, and working then towards positive change and actually having success, a level of success. So I would say that was definitely near the top, is some of the changes we were able to make in California textbooks and the California guidelines or frameworks. One other thing that I'm very proud of is our efforts to get hate crimes against the Hindu community tracked by the FBI. Prior to 2015, anti-Hindu hate crimes were not even recognized as a standalone category. So working along with other coalition partners on that effort, I think was one of probably the most important things that we've done, because it set the precedent now. So if there's an attack on a temple, whether it's a vandalism or some type of other attack, or on an individual, it is properly tracked, and law enforcement now better understands what those crimes look like, and so they can better address those and work with the community on those. So those are just a couple, I would say, of the highlights of the last achievements. There have been many others, of course, but those stick out in particular for me.
Those are really huge, yeah. So you would say like your dad is what I guess I was going to ask if there was a certain point that was a turning point in your life that made you want to advocate for these issues. Would you say your dad is, or was there another point that you felt like you need to?
Sure. So I think my dad has definitely inspired me, and that was always there. I think what a turning point probably for me was in college and undergrad. I went to UC Irvine. I took a human rights class, so I took a lot of international relations and political science classes as part of my major. And in one of my classes, it was a human rights class, and it was taught by a former official from one of the major human rights organizations. I can't recall, it was either Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International. And I wrote a paper on the plight of the Kashmiri Pandits or Kashmiri Hindus and the ethnic cleansing of them. And I did well in the paper, which was nice. But I remember speaking to my professor for a few minutes after class one day, and she had said she had never heard about Kashmiri Hindus or what happened to them. And I think that really stuck with me because it showed that there's so much work to be done, that this major, a tragic, event that forced, more than 350,000, between 350,000 and 500,000 Hindus to leave their homes was not even recognized by human rights groups, or they didn't even know about that. I think that was definitely a turning point and made me really feel that I wanted to go into do something with my life. I didn't know what at the time, where I could have an impact on some of these issues.
So for Hindu that might not be politically active or socially active, as so many aren't, I feel like nowadays, what might you say is the importance of being informed and for us to know about these these issues?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, when we're talking about issues here in the US, whether you're active or not, I think these are important issues because they affect all of us in our daily lives. They may not affect us today, they may not affect us tomorrow, but they'll certainly affect us or somebody that we care about at some point in our lives. Whether you're a parent or a student that is worried about how, Hinduism and Hindus and India are represented in textbooks, which can lead to bullying if it's not done the right way, and at its worst can lead to Hindu phobia and hate crimes, or it's about somebody getting attacked in the community and a hate crime being perpetrated, or a place of worship, a mandir, being attacked. It's always something that we have to be concerned about because it could affect us at any time, and it likely will affect us or somebody that we care about at some point. So, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to be an activist. Not everyone needs to be an advocate or actively involved in these issues, but they should definitely take interest to educate themselves on them, and to help share information when possible, to help educate their friends, their neighbors, their teachers, their colleagues, especially for those that are younger. I think it's really critical to be informed and to correct stereotypes, to correct misinformation, and to educate others about who we are, what our needs are, what our issues are. And because we're not disconnected from this world or what happens in it, and I think we have to take an active part in at least educating ourselves and others.
Right. So, as we conclude, are there any final words on your passion for advocacy and just what being Hindu means to you and how you stuck with that throughout your life?
Sure. So advocacy, I think we can all be advocates in our own ways. We can all take small steps. Again, sharing information, social media is a powerful tool. I think we're all in some way or the other involved on social media. So even sharing information about some of the issues, pressing issues that are affecting Hindu Americans and others as well, not just confined to us, but issues that are of common concern to our communities. It's important to take some steps, in sharing the information, educating ourselves again. And advocacy is not a formal process, right? Advocacy, all it means is standing up, having a voice, and expressing that voice for things that you believe in and things that are important to you. So we can all be advocates in our own way, whether it's at the macro level and a larger scale, or at a smaller scale, in our schools and our workplaces, in our everyday lives. So it's important for everyone to be advocates for themselves. It's important for everyone to be advocates for their identity, and for issues that are affecting themselves, their friends, and their neighbors. In terms of the other part of the question, and you know, I would say that let's see, it's a little bit difficult to answer.
I guess like how that deals with your identity, like being Hindu, how that's just transformed and changed the way you view things, maybe, and um, mostly to like young American Hindus, the importance
Sure,
of being connected to those roots and
sure.
being informed about all these issues that you.
Yeah, yeah. I think the reason I would say it is difficult to answer is because I think it's constantly evolving. But what I would say is that for me, if I were to boil it down to a few different things, it's one, it's the concept of dharma and wanting to basically do partake in righteousness conduct or to do what's right at the end of the day. And my own dharma, I think, drives me to speak up for issues that I care about and for issues that I feel are affecting our community. It's about seva, selfless service, and it's about the concept of pluralism. I think that is one of Hinduism's unique gifts to the world, and through our advocacy work, I think it's important to bring that message to others that we have to be pluralistic. We are naturally pluralistic as Hindu Americans and as Hindus, but it's important to have that in others and try to influence others in how they act as well, and get away from ideas of exclusiveness or creating these artificial boundaries, that we should all be pluralistic in our approach. We should accept multiple paths. We don't have to agree with them, but we should definitely respect them. And I think it's just, in terms of connected to my roots and my identity, is that if I don't speak up, I can't expect others to speak up or be active to protect my own identity. So we're all responsible for standing up for ourselves and for our identity. And at the end of the day, our identity defines us. We don't have just one identity. Obviously, we have our national identity, our ethnic identity, our linguistic identity, our religious identity, etc. But as part of that identity, your Hindu American identity is an important part of that. And you have to stand up for that. We can't be shy about that identity. We can't say, okay, in our personal life, we're going to be Hindu. Outside, we're going to be just American. No, we are Hindu American. We are a composite of all those identities. And it's so important to do work, whether it's through being a volunteer, whether it's just advocating and sharing and educating. But it's important to everything you do, you have to realize you can't shed that identity. That's always a part of us. And I think that's what kind of helped further propel me into my work and more and got me more and more involved, is that this is who I am, and I have to stand up for what I believe in and that identity. Otherwise, things are happening in the world and here at home in America that are not acceptable. And if I don't stand up, then I can't count on others to do the same.
That's very inspiring that you, even though growing up here, that you're so connected and with your identity as being a Hindu, and not only that, but can advocate for everybody else. So
Thank
um,
you.
thank you so much. And anything else you would like to finish with, or um,
Yeah, no, I think I feel optimistic about the future. I think those, and when I say the younger generation, that's a very broad, I think, category. But I think whether it's high school kids or college kids, we have I think the brightest kids in America, and I think people are more and more understanding of some of the issues that are affecting us and being more and more vocal, which I think I feel very happy about. And we want to make sure that it's not just for us, but for future generations, that we create an environment in America where we can all live and thrive, don't have to feel shy about who we are, and can make sure that we all work with broader American society and stakeholders to be proud of our identity and protect our identity, and protect our community in whatever way we can. So I think the future is bright. I'm very optimistic, and I invite others to be advocates. Of course, if you want to pursue a career in advocacy, that's even better. But even advocating on an individual level is so important.
thank you so much. Very
Thank
inspiring.
you.
Yes.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So on that note, I think we'll end it. Dhanyavad. Thank you.